Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I am Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Hey, we're going to talk today about anti-Second Amendment companies because, as we know, there is a lot of private organizations that are doing the dirty work for this particular presidential administration. They're kind of espousing all of the talking points that we get out of this particular administration. And it goes from the banks to the shipping companies and especially social media companies. They will literally squelch any Second Amendment voice they possibly can. And candidly, the list doesn't stop there. There is company after company after company. And what we've talked about is the privatization of tyranny. Well, maybe Idaho has come up with a way for other states to deal with this. This is kind of along the Bud Light Target model, if you would. And perhaps more states should start doing it because I think we can make a big impact. I'll explain in a moment, connect all the dots for you. So today, let's spend a few minutes and let's talk about Idaho figures out how to deal with anti-2A companies. Okay, we're going to be talking about two separate Senate bills out of the state of Idaho. We don't talk about Idaho frequently here on Washington Gun Law, even though I have spent a ton of time in the state of Idaho. And in fact, of any state other than Washington State, the state that I have probably spent the most time in is, in fact, Idaho. I love everything about the state of Idaho. I love them even more, and you will too when you hear about the two Senate bills we're going to be talking about. The first one is Senate Bill 1291. Now, this is, I think, a fantastic model for other states moving forward on how to deal with companies that just really don't share your values. You know, the companies out there that are constantly screaming to disarm lawful and responsible citizens while at the same time dumping money into bail programs to allow rioters to be freed from jails. So the state of Idaho here has come up with a really fantastic plan, which is essentially this. Hey, listen, if you're one of those companies, state law here in Idaho, it precludes us from doing business with you. So you follow? Now, this is how Senate Bill 1291 would work if enacted into legislation, because the law would then read, except as provided in subsection 2 of this section, a public entity may not enter into a contract with a company for goods or services unless the contract contains a written certification from the company that it is not currently engaged in and will not for the duration of the contract engage in a boycott of any individual or company because of the individual or company. So what the state of Idaho law says here is that, hey, listen, if we find out that you are boycotting a company for one of these two reasons, we can't do business with you. Now, what are the two reasons that a company could be boycotting another entity that would then preclude the state of Idaho from doing business with them? It's this. A, engages in or supports the exploration, production, utilization, transportation, sale, or manufacture of fossil fuel-based energy, timber, minerals, hydroelectric power, nuclear energy, or agriculture. So essentially all of your traditional forms of energy and agriculture. And then the second reason, check this one out, engages in or supports the manufacture, distribution, sale, or use of firearms as defined in Idaho law. So if you got a company that is out there screaming bloody murder for green energy and we need to get rid of fossil fuels, if you're a company out there that's screaming to terminate agriculture as we know it in the United States, or if you're a company that says that Americans should not have their inalienable rights as guaranteed by the Second Amendment, well, then the state of Idaho cannot do business with you. Now, there's a couple of exceptions, but the exceptions really is the company has to be at least 10 or more employees, and the contract has to be worth at least $100,000. But I can assure you that most government contracts for private services will almost always exceed that $100,000 limit. Now, while I think that this is a fantastic first step, the way we're going to get more companies to knock off this nonsense is to have more states adopt similar legislation. You see, the gross domestic product of the state of Idaho right now is $84 billion. And by the way, if you track their GDP over the last few years, you'll see that they have one of the fastest growing GDPs anywhere in the United States. I wonder if there's a bunch of people moving to Idaho. I wonder why. But let's take a look at two other states that we traditionally look at as conservative states. The state of Florida has a gross domestic product of $1.3 trillion, and the state of Texas has a gross domestic product of $2.4 trillion annually. So could you imagine if the state of Florida and the state of Texas and any other state that actually honors your inalienable rights pass similar legislation? Well, this would stop this activity by these private entities pretty darn quick. And this is something that we have to understand, that when you're on the conservative side of things, when you do have the law and the facts and common sense on your side, one of the other things you have is you have tremendous amount of economic power. And we have already seen what other types of boycotts can do to companies such as Bud Light and Target, who for whatever reason want to preach to you what your values should be because you shop their products. So that is Senate Bill 1219. We're going to link it up down below so that you guys can geek out on it for yourself. Kudos to the state of Idaho. We're going to carefully watch this. We want to see if it passes. Now, the other piece of legislation I want to tell you about is Senate Bill 1317. What does Senate Bill 1317 do? Well, Senate Bill 1317, in enacted into legislation, would create a Gadsden flag license plate in the state of Idaho. Now, that sounds really, really awesome, but here's the other cool thing about this bill, is that obviously there's additional fees that are owed to actually get the Gadsden flag plate, and then there'd be additional fees owed each year that you renew that. However, all of those funds would then be earmarked into a program that would teach firearm safety in both primary and secondary schools. So this is giving individual citizens in Idaho the choice to purchase a Gadsden flag, knowing they're going to pay a little extra, but all of that money then will go into programs that the same bill will establish primary and secondary education programs that will be funded by the sale of this license plate. Again, this is Senate Bill 1317. We're going to link it up down below because we think this is an absolutely fantastic idea, a wonderful piece of legislation, one that we will never see here in Washington State, but one of the reasons that some of you guys may turn on YouTube one day and find out that my channel is called Idaho Gun Law. Okay, once again, we are talking about Senate Bill 1291. That's the bill that would prohibit the state of Idaho from engaging into contracts with private entities that don't share the same values as Idaho citizens. And then, of course, Senate Bill 1317, which would create the Gadsden flag license plates and provide additional funding for firearm safety and training both in primary and secondary schools. Kudos to the state of Idaho. You know, when you're not Washington, there's only one of two ways that you're going to end up on Washington gun law. Either one, you do something so terribly rotten, sinister, and evil to your citizens that we have to share your insanity with everyone else around the country. Or number two, you do something to preserve the inalienable rights of your citizens to such a degree that we think you deserve an attaboy. You all deserve an attaboy. Listen, we'll go ahead and link up both of the Senate bills down below so you guys can geek out on it for yourself. And if you got any other questions about this or anything else related to what's left of our Second Amendment rights, you guys should know how to get a hold of Washington gun law by now. If you don't, that's okay. That information is also down there in the description box. And then finally, let's everyone remember that part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here, is to know what the law is in every situation, how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching and stay safe.